Hello and welcome to the latest from Hearts Standard. My name is Joel Sked and I'm delighted to be joined by Scott McIntosh. How's it going, Scott?
Yeah, very well. Thanks very much for having me on, Joel.
No problem. Yeah, my pleasure. We're here to chat about the big news story of the week. Of course, Tony Bloom and his proposed investment into Hearts that broke on Monday. I know you've spoken about it on Discussion in the Funnel. Me and Craig spoke about it on Monday, but I was basically just reacting to it breaking there and then. So we'll put a bit more meat on those bones, and then we'll also chat about tomorrow's match against St Mirren, which is shaping up to be a very, very big one. So, but before that, sorry, I knew there was something I needed to do, and it is, of course, wait till I get my script up. Oh, this is embarrassing. It's about sponsorship. I really should have been prepared, but this is me just waffling, and you can see it on the round on the screen. But Good Vibes Giveaways are proud to sponsor Hearts Standard and offer fantastic prizes to fans of the club. Prizes change weekly and include tech gadgets, days out, weekends away, tax-free cash, and even OASIS tickets. Get your tickets now at www.goodvibesgiveaways.com and enter for your chance to spread the good vibes. Now, speaking of vibes, Scott, what is your vibe from the news around Tony Bloom? You've kind of 3, 4, 5 days on. How has what are your general thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think tentatively, sort of speaking, just positive, but very much on a tentative basis. I think there's still a lot. There's still a lot to convince me that, you know, there's something long term in this. I think the 2-year sort of trial period concerns me slightly because it does allow things to just sort of come to a natural end at that 2 years if there's no sort of, you know, ironclad sort of clause in there to say that they need to take on something at the end of that spell. Then potentially where does that leave the club in terms of sort of the recruitment that they've been carrying out for, say, the 18 to 24 months prior to that? What happens to that? So yeah, I think there's a lot that still needs to be answered. Now, I totally understand that when there's talk of a significant investment within any sort of Scottish club outside of the Old Firm, I get that people will get quite giddy with that information, and that's completely fine, especially given how we're performing on the pitch just now. I would never begrudge a fan from, you know, wanting to dream about what could potentially come off of this, and particularly given the sort of sample sizes that we've seen from sort of Brighton and USG over the last sort of 3 or 4 seasons, there's a lot to be happy or positive about. But again, you need to know how this is going to work within our current template and our current structure before we can determine whether it's going to or yield the same results. So just now, happy to see that there is people that are still looking to invest in the club, which means that obviously the club are still in a reasonably sound footing off the pitch, regardless of what's going on it just now. But yeah, I think we need to know more. There needs to be more detail, I think, before anyone can really determine whether this is something that's going to work within this club and within this league.
Yeah, absolutely. I think hopefully that more digging or more details come out. It seems the deal is progressing, and well, without having anything concrete, just the conversations I've had, the suggestion would be that the investment would be into the transfer budget, the playing budget, and then Tony Bloom could benefit off the back of that. So I think that's certainly something exciting. I completely agree. You have to be tentative, and there are kind of 1 or 2 things you need to be wary of. As a fan, I very much lead on the giddy side. For example, Gerald Taylor I was pronouncing him signing of the season after the Spurs games. I just want to look on the positive side, but the way I look at it just on the surface level is Tony Bloom, and this is, I'll look at the positive side and I'll come on to the concern in a second. The positive is Tony Bloom and his track record. You talked about Brighton, you talked about USG. It'd be daft not to want to have someone of his stature and his track record and success being involved in football clubs. It'd be daft not to want to have him involved with the club just because of he's having spoken to people this week, just hugely intelligent. He's been transformational, and it's something that clubs really, really big clubs around world football have wanted to replicate or kind of take on. There's been chat around Liverpool and Chelsea want to do that. You see that Brighton have had a number of their key members of staff taken away, Dan Ashworth, for example. But I think one of the guys I spoke to, he made the point, it's like people were just expecting them to go the same way as Southampton and Leicester. They sell their players and like lose key member of staff, and then they sink. But what he said is, what people maybe don't understand is none of those clubs have Tony Bloom. He's the person kind of behind it. He's his company, and he's the key man. So getting him involved is him wanting to be involved in Hearts, I think, should be viewed as hugely, hugely positive. My overriding concern, maybe not concern, but something that I'm kind of wary of is you look at the success that Brighton and Royal Union Saint-Gilloise have had, and it's because it's not been manager-led, it's not been sporting director-led, it's been club-led. It's came down from the top. This is how we operate. Tony Bloom's put people in key positions that he trusts, that share his vision, that it's all aligned, that from top to bottom, the club is aligned. So it's all structured in a way for that to be success. And the recruitment obviously is massive. I think it's probably the key, the thing that people look at most, especially with Brighton, but it's also the recruitment is just one aspect of that success, a key aspect of that success, but just one aspect of that success. So that's my only things. Like, if it came in, I mean, I wouldn't be against him having more say on how the club is run, because again, this is a guy who has loads of experience within football clubs and good success within football club. Why would you not want to tap into that knowledge aside from the recruitment?
Yeah, and I think that's all fair. I think, and this is where I am with it just now. I think there's so much unknown about it, and yeah, I'm maybe using the word concern. That's maybe a bit harsh. It is just a lot of unknowns about this deal, and that's why I'm not really wanting to jump both feet in yet, and sort of, you know, nail my colours to the mast and say that I'm 100% behind this. Because let's just say, for example, let's try and second guess what Tony Bloom's intentions are. Let's say that Tony Bloom, further down the line, wants to sell this formula that Star Lizard have with regards to their recruitment, okay, and their analysis. Now, let's say that to do that or enhance that price tag, he wants to use an example of a club within this country where it's used over a 2-year, 3-year spell, and he's able to show the results of that, either through on-the-field performance or through the transfer activity of said club, okay? Now, in the short term, that might be okay for Hearts, similar to the SMG money. We might be able to splash a bit of cash, we might be able to offer some big deals, but if we are unable to push the needle in terms of the income at the club over that 2 or 3 year spell, and then Brighton walk away at the end of it, then we're then left with those contracts and with those deals. So that's where, this is where there needs to be more certainty over what happens at the end of the 2 years. Now, this, and again, we're second guessing it. Let's say Tony Bloom actually wants to be in this in the long term, and he actually sees Hearts as being a good prospect, similar to USG in terms of having a history, having some challenges and knocks on the way, slowly bringing themselves back up into a position of strength, and, you know, Tony Bloom just sort of adding that little bit of sort of magic dust to take them that extra step. If he's in it in the long term, but they're not wanting to say just now, and if this is a part of Anne Budge transitioning slowly away from the club during the next 2 years, but still wanting to have a legacy of winning something, because this is something that's been running through my mind. What's keeping Anne Budge at the club just now? She's going to be fully paid up, I believe, in October of this year. The hotel's done, the stand's more or less done. So there's those legacy aspects are in place in terms of off the pitch, in terms of those revenue generators. But is there something that she's striving to have on the pitch before she decides to leave the club? Let's just say, for example, that Anne Budge and Tony Bloom are having discussions around him buying her shares in 2 years' time. There's maybe a sort of unconditional sort of clause somewhere in the contract saying that that'll happen. They're not going to make it public. And basically Anne Budge is saying, well, I'll kind of, in name, still be in charge of the club over the next 2 years. My hope is that we win a trophy during that time. I can walk away with my head held high because there's been some on-the-field success to complement what's happened off the field. Fine. That's fine if that's how they want to play it. But again, it's an unknown. It could be that they want to dilute the Foundation of Hearts shares. Now, Foundation of Hearts have come out publicly and said that that's not a position that they're looking to budge on just now. But again, they might be thinking, but if the fans see that there's success with this recruitment portfolio over the next 18 to 24 months, if we were to broach that subject again in 2 years, are we confident that the fans would be happy for that share to be diluted? So this is the thing. We don't know. We don't know what the intentions of Tony Bloom are. We don't know what the intentions of the board and that are as well. And the other thing to take into consideration, which I think few of us are talking about just now, and again, you've already raised it, Joel, at USG and at Brighton, there was full autonomy from Tony Bloom on what was happening from top to bottom of those clubs. Now, if we are just bringing in £10 million investment and a portfolio with that Star Lizard analytics profile attached to it, that's okay to an extent. But if you don't have the management structure in there to complement it, then you're just as well doing what Heath Ledger does in The Dark Knight and just getting that, huge ton of cash and just setting a light to it. Because it's not going to be worth anything. And this is the thing. Potentially, because Joe Savage is left in the summer, potentially he is going to get full autonomy. And that was part of this whole sort of transition over to Tony Bloom and that investment. But again, we don't know. And this is the problem. None of us really know what's going on. So we're all trying to sort of second guess. And that's why I'm just not wanting to fully back it, because I just don't know. I don't want there to be this situation where we dive into something for 2 years and it yields short-term results, but then we're left with 50% into 4-year deals with players that we can't really afford. So that there does need to be that detail given with regards to how it looks in terms of, going into the weeds. High level, yeah, that's fine saying that there's £10 million investment, but how does that actually look over a 2-year spell? And what is the intention at the end of the 2 years with regards to either Anne Budge's shares or the Foundation of Hearts shares?
I commend you, Scott, for your long-term approach and long-term view and logical view to it. I see 10 million. I'm thinking, let's get into the transfer market. Let's have a wee bit of fun once again.
That's fine. I think every fan's entitled to that. And I have my moments where I think about that as well. I think about, wouldn't it be great to have a January transfer window where we can buy X, Y, and Z? But I do think, we should always be looking at self-sustainability. And although we should always be welcome to outside investment, and it's great having benefactors like James Anderson, it's great having potential investors by Tony Bloom look at the club, that should be looked as a positive. What we can't forget is what we have been trying to build within the Foundation of Hearts since 2014, which is having a way of passing this club down to future generations, which ensures that it's self-sustainable. And unfortunately, waiting on an outside investment and benefactors, they might not always be there. God bless James Anderson. He's not always going to be here. God bless Tony Bloom. He's not always going to potentially be here as well. So we've always got to look at that long term. And that's why I'm always a little bit concerned that, we get sort of seduced by the figures, the high level detail, but we don't consider what happens 2 years down the line. And I apologise to everyone that's watching, because they must be thinking, what a fucking killjoy.
Bring on Fitzroy Simpson and Gordon Petrish. Gareth Shankowski's attack as features. No, that's absolutely fair and absolutely definitely something to be wary about, concerned about with regard to if he walked away. And we had got these big contracts, but with regard to the Foundation of Hearts, I've seen a few people mention it's like, we've worked so hard to get the club into the fans' hands, and we're so close to went into administration, so close to being going out of business. Full stop. One thing I would say with Bloom is that he's aiming to be at Brighton for the next 15 to 20 years. They want to be a top 10 club in England. They want to, with that likely comes European football. Hearts are wanting to be in European football. You've seen it with Union Saint-Gilloise, that he had to become a minority shareholder because we're both in Europe. So I don't think there's any. I don't think there should be any concerns from fans about, oh, this could mean that Foundation of Hearts might might no longer be the majority shareholder. I don't think that's what this means.
So I think that's fair, and I'm totally on board with that. I don't think Tony Bloom has an appetite to be a majority share. He's not going to leave Brighton to come to Hearts to be a majority shareholder. So I think that's completely fine. I think where I'm not articulating it properly is perhaps the case of what we can't have is a sense of complacency within the foundation and within the club because we have investment and potential benefactors at this current moment in time. We haven't pushed the needle in terms of the number of pledgers at this club for quite a few years now. And so there's already a little bit of complacency in my eyes in terms of we're always going to have these people to sort of pull us through these sort of situations. I think that if Tony Bloom comes in with this investment, we have to make sure that we are looking long term with this as well. We can't just view this as a sort of 2-year stopgap and then have to pretty much just, press the reset button again in 2 years' time, which is why I think there needs to be some level of reassurance that this goes past 2 years. That whole aspect of it, the 2-year trial thing, is what really concerns me more than anything else. We can't press the reset now and then have to do it again 18, 24 months down the line. So that's where there needs to be some level of communication with the club to say it's unofficial, but James Anderson is going to be looking to transition into buying 1, new shares, 2, diluting the Foundation of Hearts shares to a degree where they're still the majority, but it's maybe not 75%, or 3, looking to take on Anne Budgie shares in 2 years' time. There needs to be some level of reassurance about that. Otherwise, there's uncertainty over the next couple of years. And as much as it might look okay when we're bringing set players in, we know how difficult this league can be, and it can be. USG and Brighton, it didn't happen overnight at either of those clubs either. I get that with USG, they were probably further behind in terms of being on an upward trajectory. I believe they were still in the 2nd division when he took over there.
Yeah, they were.
I get that we're a bit further on from potentially where Brighton and USG were when Tony Bloom got involved at those clubs, but 2 years is not a long time. And with the amount of churn that you probably would need to see to get us to where Tony Bloom views us. This is the other thing, there was that external review, and although this is just little sound bites at this stage, a couple of things that were mentioned were the fact that we had an aging squad and we lacked legs. Now, those aren't things that get fixed in one January window. That takes at least 2 or 3 windows to try and remedy. So, and especially with our bloated squad just now in certain areas. So, and this is why I think that there needs to be reassurance that this isn't going to just be a 2-year deal, because I think it's going to take longer than 2 years to remedy where we currently are as a squad. If that is the viewings or the findings from that summer review, that's going to take them a little bit of time to sort of remedy, because January, we always know historically January is quite a hard window to navigate in terms of looking at long-term fixes. It's fine if you're wanting to fix something short term for that season, but long term, very seldom do you see clubs making sort of long term decisions that are going to sort of benefit them. So I think that's why there needs to be a little bit of sort of calm with this as well. Again, it's good positive news, and we're needing that just now given everything else that's going on. But again, I just think there needs to be a bit more detail and a bit more comms before we can really fully analyse and decide how this might potentially look for us just now.
Yeah, absolutely. And my confidence is that speaking to people is that he came into Saint-Gilloise and he had respect for their history, their identity, and again, speaking to someone in Brighton, he was like, he won't be dismissive, but he might even be attracted to the fact that the club are fan-owned, considering how important the fans were when Brighton were almost were kind of knocking on death's door at times in the mid-90s as well. So he doesn't seem to be the type of owner who come and just dismiss everything or look to change loads of things. So I think that's encouraging. You probably respect the fact that where Hearts have been, where they've got into, and what it could mean going forward. So yeah, I'm trying to think if there was anything else worth adding into this with regards to Budge. That's what I was speaking to mates. Was wondering if this could be the like you said, kind of long term for kind of her legacy. But I do know like she's not the type of person to just go into the background and put her feet up. She wants to be that's kind of person she is. She wants to be hands-on. She wants to work. So, but I think that would be attractive for a lot of fans, is that if it was that kind of that transition. So yeah, that's one to definitely keep an eye on. I don't think there is anything else worth adding. Darren asked here, morning lads. What's your thoughts on being related to Joe Savage's resignation? We kind of talked about that. And is Tony Bloom's data system so good that it can sign players who fit into our random shapes and styles? One thing I know is Hearts are not getting just like the keys to the algorithm, just like, right, you just crack on and look into it.
Liverpool offered 50 million for that formula and got rebuffed. So yes, it's going to be interesting to see how selective this is. And the thing you have to remember is that Tony Bloom's the only one who really has the full formula. You know, Chelsea have tried to sign various members from the Brighton backroom staff to try and get this formula and still don't have it. So yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to see just exactly how this looks for Hearts, given that it's a 10 million investment from him. We're not actually paying for any of this. So that's where it is definitely going to be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a fact that I think it will be overseen by Bloom and his team rather than it just being, there's an algorithm, lads, you can crack on. I think it'll be very much, they'll kind of be overseeing it, and Hearts will hopefully beneficiaries of it. Right, we will move on to chat about the game very shortly. Actually, I'll bring in, it's worth asking this question. From Graham, what's your opinion on Pollock going on loan to Rafe? Should be starting first, in my opinion. Got pace to burn, which we sadly lack. So yesterday, Finlay Pollock signed a new deal until 2026, but has gone on loan to Rafe Rovers until the end of the season with an option, with a clause for Hearts to recall him. And also Callum Sandilands signed a new deal until 2027. But in terms of Pollock, he's been in the squad, first team squad 4 times this season. I think he's not played. He's watched him for the B team. He's been brilliant. Caveat that his end product is erratic and needs to refine, but everything else around his game has been really, really good. What do you make of it, Scott? Do you think it's a good move for him, or do you think he should be more involved?
Yeah, 2 trains he fought. I think for him individually, it's a good move. I think, given the torrid time he's had over the last couple of years with injuries, I think it's good for him to go down to a club that will look after him. I think Rafe have got a good history with Hearts in terms of taking loan players on and sort of progressing them over a short spell with a view to them coming in and making an immediate impact. I mean, David...
Some more than others.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention Dennis Pritchenenko. I'd already tweeted about him last night. But yeah, in terms of Jamie Walker and Dave Templeton, they were 2 examples of people who went in for 2 or 3 month spells and, definitely benefited that. So I think for him, it's a good idea. I still have reservations whether it was the right thing for us to do in the immediacy. I do think that in terms of trying to firefight the situation for Stephen Naismith just now, one of the things that would have benefited him would have been to have at least tried something a little bit different within the personnel. Whether that be given a bit more trust in some of the new signings like Spittle and Danda, or bringing in 1 or 2 of the sort of younger players. So yeah, I think for the team, maybe not the right move, but for Finlay Pollock, I think it definitely is.
Yeah. As long as the key is hopefully the big thing for him is minutes, and hopefully he's going to get those minutes at Rafe, because if he's not getting them in the first team, the B team was something just keep him ticking across at the start of the season, just to get that regularity. Being able to play twice in a week was massive for him, being able to start twice in a week, and then he built his minutes up there, 60, 65, 70, 75, played 90 minutes. So as long as he's got that option at Rafe, that's going to be massive for him to play at a higher level, to get just that regularity of games, the robustness. He's been learning to use his body a bit more, and kind of both in games like the recovery stage, etc. My I've been banging the drum, I think, all season. I would have liked to see him in the first team. I think there's players within the first team who have had plenty of opportunities, not just this season, but going back to last season as well, and have simply just not delivered. Where I think Pollock could have brought a freshness and energy to the team. And yes, his final ball, like I said, needs worked on. He's still young, and he's only really started to get into the winger position, which is completely acceptable. But as Graham says, he has pace. Pace kills teams. And that's, even if it's just off the bench, you want to be able to. I think he could change games in certain scenarios. So that's my frustration, is we've not seen enough of him, and potentially others as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough, and I think he will get chances at Rafe. I watched them at East End Park a couple of weeks ago, and I believe they had Mullen playing right back because they've obviously got personnel issues there. Dylan Easton's kind of having to play away from a central role. They've sort of got him out wide left, so I think they were looking at wide options because they're currently having to sort of chop and change and sort of cover for other areas. So I do think there's the potential there for him to get a sustained run in that team for a couple of months, and hopefully, Hearts have got the right to sort of bring him back at any times and sort of reactivate him back within our squad. So hopefully it is a case where we can get him those minutes away from the spotlight of being involved at Hearts when we're struggling for points, and he comes back all the better for it.
Right, let's move on to talk about Saturday's game. Away to St Mirren. It's a big one. Let's just get straight into it. I think, Michael, it's I don't think it's any secret. It's a really big game for Stephen Naismith. Hearts are bottom of the league. Hearts not won a game in 8 games this season. It's the worst start ever to a season. Because I was going to ask you, so Michael asked, what's your thoughts on the manager's position if we lose on Saturday? My question was more, is this the biggest game of Naismith's Hearts tenure?
I don't know. I feel like he's now in a position where every week's going to be his biggest game. Isn't it? Every week's going to be a cup final for him personally. I think he already had 1 or 2 of those games earlier on last year as well. I think Fir Park was probably quite a big game for him. I think Parkhead was probably quite a big game for him last year. So, yeah, I think this is just another one. And I think this is why, ultimately, long-term, his position, I just can't see him getting out of this, because even if we somehow get a result tomorrow, we're only 1 defeat away from being back in that position, I think, with Stephen Naismith. And this is where it's difficult, I think, for him to sort of fight his way out of it. If you look at it last year, we went on an unbeaten run of 13 games, 12 wins and 1 draw. To really sort of move away from any sort of noise about his position. This team looked nowhere near reaching those heights. So for me, I think he's already as good as gone. It's now just a case of when, and we're kind of, a win tomorrow probably kicks the can down the road maybe another couple of weeks, but we've seen no evidence of any progression in possession. Not just this season, but from this time last year. So really, what hope or what evidence is there to suggest that he can be the long-term solution for us? And again, because of all the noise that's circulating now regarding Tony Bloom's investment, if that has had any sort of say in Joe Savage's position, if that does somehow have any potential say in whether Andrew McKinlay is maybe quite anxious to maybe move along the M8 to Rangers, then it could be that Stephen Naismith's position is getting looked at already anyway. So, yeah, I think he's pretty much a dead man walking anyway. It's just a case now of when rather than if. I wish that wasn't the case. I'd rather we had a bit more long-term, security with our managers. I wish there was a bit more continuity with that. But unfortunately, this run has killed him. And, that you can't really defend those stats. Ultimately 2 goals scored, no clean sheets since the start of the season. What can you say to that?
Yeah, I think that is that's fair. I was having the same. I was out for a walk this morning. I was having the same kind of the same thought in terms of what you said about kicking the can down the road and just the next defeat. And you look at, and going back to that run last season, is that between now and the international break, you're looking at having to win basically every game. So beat St Mirren, then go into Ross County, go home to Ross County, beat Ross County, go to Azerbaijan, and either draw, win there, or come back, draw, or win at Aberdeen, and you've got the poor form behind you, the poor start to the season behind you, and then you've got a wee bit of momentum, positivity going in, because then after the international break, you've got home at St Mirren, home at Ammonia, away to Hibs, home at Kelly, away to St Johnstone, and then home to Heidenheim. So then there's a run of fixtures there, but you can see going back to last season, Hearts going through an unbeaten spell. But as you said, that there's the way that the team have performed this season, it's hard to see them doing that. Not just, I think, defensively, fine. We've obviously made a number of individual errors, but attacking wise, it's so hard to take any confidence from the way the team have attacked. And you kind of look back at using the benefit of hindsight, that Fleetwood game, a lot of red flags there with the way that the team kind of set up and just struggled so much, and then how that maybe knocked the Naismith's view going into the season. So yeah, it's difficult. That's the only thing you can say from.
Yeah, I think for me, when the time comes to have a proper post-mortem over what happened with Stephen Naismith this season and, his tenure at Hearts in general, I think there's a sort of 10-minute spell at Dens Park that I think will be quite key to sort of identifying where it started to go wrong. Things, you can get individual errors with footballers, footballers can have bad games, manager can have bad days, but there was something about the way that we finished that first half where you visibly saw players frustrated with what they had been asked to do, and you were seeing normally dependable players losing their head. If you look at Frankie Kent for the penalty, for the third goal, the way he just lazily puts out a leg, those were players that were not in the right headspace. And I think for me, that was probably the first proper red flag, where it wasn't just a team having a bad day. There was players who looked, body language wise, did not look invested in what the manager was wanting from them. And unfortunately, bar a couple of reasonably resolute performances away to Pilsen and against Celtic at the weekend, again, the body language just doesn't, it doesn't fill me with any sort of optimism whatsoever. And I think ultimately that's where I saw things starting to really fall to bits. He's then obviously tried the sort of Fleetwood thing against Falkirk. And again, if the first 20 minutes go a little bit better in terms of our sort of decision making and sort of quality in front of goal, then that might end a little bit better for us. But yeah, he then goes back to what he'd used before. He's been trying to second guess himself this season. I do have a lot of sympathy for him, because I do think he has shown flexibility whilst he's been at Hearts. I think he's also shown that he can set Hearts up in certain fixtures to our benefit. But unfortunately, our bread and butter is trying to be the best of the rest. And the way to get there, and to appease fans with some decent football as well, is to do it by being high tempo, making the best out of possession, not just having, possession for the sake of it. And I think that's where he's really failed ultimately. And I think if you can't do that, Hearts is not the right club for him, and he's not the right person for Hearts. Again, I'm not going to go into that whole it's black and white. He's a bad manager, he's a good manager. I just think it isn't a good.
He's a young manager. This goes back.
It's just not a good fit for him just now. Hearts and Stephen Naismith do not fit in terms of what he needs to work on as a coach and manager, and what Hearts need out of their manager at this particular time to move on from last year's success.
Yeah. It's frustrating, because personally, I really like him. Really like dealing with him. Don't agree with everything he says, but I like listening to him. Like his overview of like the club and what the club should be doing, etc. But it's been difficult to watch his football, and I think he's probably frustrated watching it, because again he talked about the way he wanted to play when he first came in. We've not really seen that. And then he got asked about it again at the shareholders dinner the other week, and again he kind of doubled down. It's like, that's what Hearts fans want to see, is what Naismith wants to see, but that's not being translated on the field. And been great if we were underdogs every week, because, like I said, I think we do really well when we don't have a lot of the ball. The way we can set up, the way we structure, and we look a better team. But unfortunately, we're not underdogs every week, and we're not. We have to be the protagonists more weeks than not, and that's where there's been real difficulty. I will be the protagonist again tomorrow, because we're going to St Mirren, and St Mirren will be happy to sit off and stay in their shape and be hard to break down. So we'll just finish up on talking about the game itself. What do you think the approach? What do you think the approach will be? Because the first time we went to St Mirren under Naismith, certainly the first time last season, we played with a back four. It was a wee bit of a lopsided midfield where Devlin looked like he was playing as a kind of right midfielder that was tucked in. Didn't work. And then ever since then, from off the top of my head, we've went for a back three. What do you think you'll go for?
Yeah, and this is the thing. I think what I think we should do and will do are definitely going to be two very different things. I think he will match up. I think he will go 3-5-2 to match up with theirs. They've been predominantly sort of 3-5-2, 3-1-4-2 if you want to. If you want to be pedantic about it. But yeah, I definitely think we'll try and match up. I think he will attempt to, in his mind, control the game by playing Benny and Boateng both as sort of sitting midfielders. I think Stephen Robinson will be quite happy if we go in and sort of try and play that game. And I think St Mirren will just go back to front. I think they'll just actually bypass the midfield. They'll just ask their midfield to make sure that they're supporting their front two and sort of just, play off the second balls and play off the scraps. And I think it's going to be a tough watch. I don't think there's going to be a lot of football there. And unfortunately, if we go in with that formation and the personnel that I think we will, I think it's going to be a very hard day for us.
What do you think? What would you do?
I think you've got to bypass the midfield. I think whenever you play teams like St Mirren, they're going to flood the midfield. They're going to try and get.
They want you to do that. Someone's just saying they just lay traps. They're a very good pressing team, and they want you to pass into certain areas.
Exactly. I mean, for me, I would be trying to go pretty much a 4-2-3-1, but have a narrow three behind Shanklin. So I'd have Halkett and Kingsley. I think Rolls struggles in these fixtures. I think, there's been a few examples of Rolls struggling. Plus, it's a back four, which I don't think is his strong suit either. I'd play Halkett and Kingsley in there because I believe they're the two best players being able to play balls up to our front end and actually being reasonably sort of consistent with it. I think that's not something that's Frankie Kent's sort of strong suit either. I think you play the two fullbacks that have been playing. I think you have Benny and Devlin playing as the sitting players, but not in a role where you're asking them to dominate possession and recycle possession. You're basically wanting them to make sure that they're filling in for the two fullbacks because you'll be asking them to provide the width. And you also want them to be intercepting the game, which they were brilliant as a double act during that first season after we came back up after our promotion. I would then play Danda, Spittle and Grant as your free and have it very narrow. Again, you're wanting Taylor and Penrice to give you the width, and you're wanting that free to occupy areas of the park, which is going to cause the St Mirren free to think, well, one of us is going to have to step out here and try and pick players up. And then you want Shanklin in his natural position, hopefully taking advantage of that and, hopefully finding some form himself. That's how I think we should go. I think we should be trying to bypass the midfield as much as we can, but I do think he'll start with Boateng and Beningame. I think you'll see a lot of ball recycling. And then it'll all come down to just who's going to win their second balls and who's going to either defend and attack their set plays, sort of with any sort of competency. And that's ultimately where I think St Mirren will beat us.
Positive. just before we finish, but yeah, I'm joking. It's hard to look just with the start of the season. It's waits a minute. Kind of Shanklin said that after the Celtic game last week was just like it's going to be a it's not going to be a great game to watch. Just finally, just want to bring in Kevin Fraser's point, which is very fair. 68 points last year, most away wins, clean sheets. Ridiculous to say he can't do it, despite not doing it for 1 month. It's a snapshot in time. Last year, breaking down some barriers, haunted others. What we're not saying he can't. I think that's the point that Scott certainly was making, is that there's when he's saying it's not a case of Naismith being a bad manager. It's basically Naismith. It's looking at how the team's not evolved and the struggles the team have been in possession. Like last season, we won't rewrite history. I thought it was successful last season. We've moaned about not winning away. We've done that. We've kind of won. We've done that. Clean sheets were excellent. Again, that was being hard to beat. We were really well structured, really well organised, but we've not evolved as a team in possession.
No, and this is the problem I've got whenever this argument's raised. It's always the black and white figures, but no one's really offering an actual suggestion as to how he's going to fix it this time round. So that's fine. It's fine to say that we have X amount of away wins, X amount of games won last season, X amount of points won. What I want people to say to me is, if they believe that Stephen Naismith can turn this around, tell me how they can do it on the pitch. What's he going to change tactically? What's he going to change with personnel that he hasn't already tried to do, by the way? It's not like, see if Stephen Naismith had been playing the same formation for the last 7 games, the same personnel, you'd maybe be able to even look at that and say, well, maybe he just needs to tinker a little bit with the formation. Maybe he needs to tinker a little bit. He's been doing that every week. So this is the problem I've always got with this. People are quite happy to sort of fall back on that black and white stat, but there's no context to that. Why don't you tell us why we had so many away wins? Well, we had continuity in our back 4 most of the time, or back 3. Not seen any of that, or back 3 or back 4. Well, not so much full-back positions, but the centre-half positions have changed constantly, week to week, game to game. We've even changed the goalkeeper situation. So that's one of the reasons why we were good last season. What was the other reason? We had the X Factor. We had Lawrence Shankland. Does that look like that's coming back anytime soon? This is the thing. Like it's all fine and well holding on to that comfort blanket of what we've done last season, but we've not shown any sign of that so far. So we albeit fine, tell us that we're being doommongers, but you've got to have more to the argument than just saying we've had X amount last season, we've done this last season. What have you seen from us this season and from the last 7 or 8 games to suggest that it's going to turn around? Because just turn around and saying, oh, well, he turned it around before, it's not enough. Because the way that he turned it round before, we've already been trying that. We've been trying to play with the 3 at the back. We've been trying to be resolute and play a bit of underdog football. But even in those games, even when we have been reasonably decent, which we both admitted to in terms of the Pilsen and Celtic games, still couldn't score a goal. Still couldn't win the game or even draw the game. Keep a clean sheet.
Yeah, I mean, kind of looking further ahead, it's one, whereas now it's like just need to win, but then it's going to take need to run off positive results. I think if you can, to look at from Naismith's point of view, if you get a run of positive results between now and the next international break, and then come back after the next international break, and then if we're the team look better in terms of breaking teams down, and I would be encouraged by that. It's like, okay, there's maybe something here, but that's going from what's happened so far this season. It's a big ask. But we'll see tomorrow when Hearts play St Mirren at Paisley, 3 p.m. kickoff. I'm going to wrap up now because I need to go to the press conference, which starts in an hour. So, yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Scott, for joining me. Enjoyed that. Enjoyed everyone's contributions. And be sure to check out the site for everything and anything around Hearts. And we'll be back on Monday to discuss, probably Monday, to discuss Saturday's game. But until then, thank you very much and goodbye.